News here. More news coming fast and furious out of Washington, D.C., out of, I guess, Mar-a-Lago down in Florida. That's the new headquarters for the Trump campaign.
The other Washington, D.C.
The others, yeah. South Florida, people are saying that's the real bastion of the Republican Party these days. Nathan Dean joins us, Bloomberg Intelligence senior policy analyst. Nathan, let's talk with Gary Gensler, plans to depart the SEC in January. What's your take on his tenure?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it can be either reversed via the courts or by a future Republican, SEC chair. I mean, a lot that he pushed in, especially, is going to be well known in the cryptocurrency space. And, one of the immediate changes that will happen when Chairman Gensler resigns is you're going to have a change in enforcement risk for the cryptocurrency industry. Currently, the SEC is engaged in a lot of enforcement actions against crypto in general, and a new Republican-appointed SEC chair can essentially reverse or a lot of that. So I think that's going to be the immediate, catalyst, if you will, from Chairman Gensler's resigning. But going forward, the question is, what is a future SEC chair going to do? There's this combination of thought out there that maybe somebody from the crypto world is going to come forth and put in a new cryptocurrency rule. But then there's a lot of folks on Wall Street that also want to return to this idea of capital formation. And you're going to see a lot of changes, I think, in terms of deregulation from some of the rules that we've seen all the way from 2005, equity market structure, if you will, and so forth. But you could also see a change in the accredited investor definition to make it easier for individuals to invest in, hedge funds, private equity funds, and so forth. But ultimately, I think a lot of what Chairman Gensler did over the last 4 years, a lot of it could be overturned in the next few years by the courts.
What kind of names fit the bill of what you were just talking about?
Yeah, so, this is I was actually joking earlier that I think that we're not seeing a lot of, well, let me rephrase this. I don't think President Trump is anywhere close to picking an SEC chairman. The reason being is I've heard 15 names being floated for potential chairs. And to my mind, that means people are floating their names on behalf of themselves. It's not coming from Mar-a-Lago. So the question is, are you going to get somebody from the crypto world, like the back CFO or Dan Gallagher from, Robinhood, if you will, somebody that would be very pro-crypto? But crypto is also a very small subset of what the SEC oversees. So you could see somebody like former Commissioner Paul Atkins or somebody that comes from the cloth of former Chairman Jay Clayton, now President Trump's pick to lead the SDNY. The question here, though, is are you going to get a crypto pick, somebody who's really focused on crypto, or are you going to get somebody that looks more to Wall Street and more to the idea of this capital formation? I think ultimately President Trump will go with the latter. Certainly someone would be friendly to crypto, but also keeps Wall Street in mind when they're moving forward with their agenda.
So, Nathan, what's the feeling in D.C. today about the Attorney General situation here with Matt Gaetz stepping down from his nomination, recognizing that he probably would not get confirmation, and then Trump immediately naming Pam Bondi? What's the feeling in D.C. about how this is all playing out?
So, I think this was anticipated. I mean, we've heard Bloomberg News report that, several senators on the Republican side were no's on this. But what I would say is that it also frees up the Senate to move quicker with additional confirmations next year. And so it actually advances the timeline for tax reform, if you will. Because if we had a serious nomination fight over Matt Gaetz, that would slow things down in the Senate. The faster that President Trump can get his nominees in place, the faster Senate can forget about these nominees and actually move on to tax reform and other things within the first 100 days of President Trump's agenda. So anytime you see one of these nominees, and Tulsi Gabbard, for DNI is another one that's getting pretty hard scrutiny. If you see, an absence or withdrawal and replaced with somebody that we think would get a better chance of Senate passage, ultimately it should speed up your anticipation of when eventual tax reform bill comes due.
Let's just hit on Treasury Secretary real fast. The latest reporting out of the Wall Street Journal is that perhaps Kevin Warsh will be Treasury Secretary until he can replace Jay Powell at the Fed, and then maybe Scott Bessent will come from the NEC and then go be Treasury Secretary. That feels like a whole lot of jigsaw puzzling happening. What does that do for policy prediction?
But I think President Trump is doing this. I think this idea is being floated out there because President Trump wants speed. He does not want his nominees to be stuck around. The faster he can get them in place, the faster he can move forward. Now, if you put Kevin Warsh into the Treasury, I think it's somebody that Wall Street would be able to work with. I think it'd be a Wall Street-friendly pick. And if you have this idea that Scott Bessent is in the wings and Kevin will eventually move over to the Fed chair, they sort of implemented their goal of this shadow Fed chair, if you will, because if we know that Kevin Warsh is going to be nominated for the Fed for the next year, well, Jerome Powell's not really going to have much of a say. The markets are going to be paying attention to more of the Treasury Secretary than not. So from President Trump's perspective, he gets speed, he gets something that Wall Street is most likely in favorable of, and he gets this idea of putting pressure on Jerome Powell to essentially, finish out the rest of his term with a shadow chair behind him.
All right, Nathan, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Nathan Dean, he's a senior policy analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us from Washington, D.C. You want to switch gears here.